Good morning, listeners. This is PWGC's Environmental Echo podcast, and I'm your host, Paul Boyce, CEO and President of PWGC. Today we've got, as always, but today is something that's really interesting. We've got the topic is going to be a soil wash plant, which I'm sure a lot of you guys may not even know what that is or have had the opportunity to find out, but we're going to educate you on it. So it's going to be a very, very interesting, exciting topic. And we've got a couple of great guests, but before I get into their intros, I just want to mention the best way to reach us is through our website, which is www.pwgrocer.com/podcasts. If you guys have questions, comments, ideas, thoughts, or topics for future podcasts and want to reach us, that's the way to do it. We're generally very responsive to that. So, again, just hit us up on the website podcast app there, and we're all set to go. But hopping right into today's guest, we've got Robert Tassey from Posilico, and he's been working at the wash plant now for, it's been open for a little while.
Yep. We are in our fourth full year of operation.
I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah, I know. Time's, it's really flown.
And you've been working for Posilico in various capacities for nearly 10 years now.
Yep.
But at the wash plant, you've been there for how long? For the full 4 years, or?
Yeah, it was actually. It goes back to when we first started designing the plant.
And this wash plant, this soil wash plant, which listeners, you guys are going to find all about, is located in Farmingdale here on Long Island, which is basically situated on the border of Nassau and Suffolk counties. So it's pretty central to the island. But Rob, as you mentioned, you've not only been involved with the wash plant, but you've been involved in numerous capacities with Posilico, including facility design and development. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
And my other guest, who is my esteemed colleague, Mr. Kris Almskog, who's a senior vice president at PWGC. And he heads up our environmental compliance division, also with Marianne, who's not here today. But he's works extensively with construction materials clients across New York, including Posilico. So, Kris, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you very much. Very excited to be here.
And you've been with us. Oh my gosh, you started out as an intern.
Yeah. Since
it's been decades,
25 plus years. Yep.
It has been a long time. So I've known you since we were in, high school, junior high. So it's
very easy to get a job.
It's been a real long time. So guys, welcome and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
So Robert, what's your main role and what else have you done in the past? Can you elaborate a little bit for us?
Sure. So, like Kris, I started out as an intern. That was back in 2013. I was doing quality control for our asphalt production, right? So making sure that the asphalt that we're making for our customers is, meeting all the specs that we have to meet, and any deviations that we make the adjustments on the plant and get the products where they need to be. I started doing that. I spent some time in New York City doing deep foundations, drilling, estimating for private development jobs. That's for our New York City division. And then I moved out to Long Island after I graduated. I went to Manhattan College, graduated in 2014. And started with engineering services. So at the time, it was a new division within the company, right out of our Farmingdale office. And basically what we focused on was the development and management of our facilities and assets.
So now that we've got a little bit about your background, about the company's background, what's a wash plant?
So soil washing is not a new technology, right? So what soil washing is what we're really doing is we're screening material, and we're separating and sorting out different particle sizes. We're using water to help us. That's where the washing part comes in. So dry screening and as well as wet screening, these technologies have been around forever. It's the application that is a little bit unique in our situation. You go to any of the sand pits or a gravel pit, every one of them is going to have a wash plant to help separate that raw material out into the sellable products that they're trying to move. What we decided to do was take soil washing from more of an environmental standpoint and apply it to recyclable materials that were, at the time, going for disposal in landfill. So you've got soil. What are the components of soil? You've got gravel, sand, and silt and clay. So the washing process, all we're really doing at a very highly precise level is separating out those components. So the sands and the gravels, those are just inert materials that have a value in the construction industry. The silts and clays, that's the organic fraction of the material. So that's where you're going to get your contamination. Any the silts and the clays are hard to reuse beneficially as is, but they only make up a small fraction of the overall, the overall volume of the material. So what we see here in our region is approximately 15% is clay and silt. The remaining 85% of the material is gravel and sand. So we're able to extract those products, clean them up to our state environmental standards, and then now we have products that we can now repurpose and resell for beneficial use into the market.
So, in other words, some of the stuff you guys actually wash is contaminated material, correct? So you might get it from a brownfields or some sort of waste site where the stuff is, if you don't do something with it, as you pointed out, it's going to a landfill. Is that the only type of product you guys work with, or do you work with like virgin clean stuff and separate that out too?
We do. It's not as competitive of a waste stream to go after for us, because our operation, we do have operational costs, so we do need to cover those with revenues, and it's all about the price of something is determined by what someone's willing to pay for it, right? So if you've got 15 different people all saying, yes, I can take that clean, non-contaminated, screened, sellable, reusable material, then it gets a lot harder to compete.
It sounds like you guys use a lot of water, and I got to imagine you're not just once through with this water. You're recycling it, you're reusing it.
Yes.
So like 1 cubic yard or 1 ton of soil when it comes in, how many gallons does it take to process it? Do you guys have a ratio?
There's a rough ratio. It's if for every, let's see, the rates are, I process about 300 tons an hour through the plant of dry soil, right? And that gets treated with about 6,000 gallons a minute of treated water.
Wow.
But again, it's recycled water. It's a closed loop system.
Exactly. It's a closed loop. It's actually net add because you do have some moisture loss. It's an outdoor operation.
Sure.
Summertime it's hot. We're getting evaporation. You get residual moisture in the product. So it's a net add system. So what are we doing? We have a connection to the local city water. We try to minimize the consumption of new water.
That's where I was going with this. Especially right now we're in a drought and everything else.
Yeah. So
6,000 gallons a minute, people are going to, whoa.
We also have, basically it's a 75,000 square foot footprint of the plant that is a fully contained, basically it's a spill containment area. And what it does is 2 things. Provides secondary containment for our whole plant. So if anything were to ever, knock on wood, if you had
something happen, sure,
catastrophic rupture or something where you have a massive release of water, we're not discharging that out into basically into the groundwater. So it's all collected, contained, and piped back into our treatment system. This way, there's no real loss of contaminants out. So it's an outdoor operation. That 75,000 square feet, it gets rained on. So over the course of the year, we're recycling between 4 and 5 million gallons of stormwater that come in. Another source of water for us, actually last year in 21, we opened up what's called a hydro tip. And this is a new kind of system. Instead of loading the dirt in dry, we're now able to inject wet liquid slurry that comes from like vac trucks. If they're cleaning out storm drains on the side of the road, or they're servicing a directional drilling project.
That's really good.
Right. So like guy's going to unclog a drain, he's got now a truck full of sediment and water. Right. So it's very hard to handle. In the past, we had like almost no capacity for this because we're on a small site, we're on 4 acres. So we put in this equipment that we helped design to basically directly unload the vac truck, and then we dewater the solids right in the system, and we consume the water.
Wow.
Right away.
I mean, sometimes in those vac trucks, you might get like water bottles and a lot of leaves and cigarette butts, and
Sure.
I assume you guys screen all that out, right?
I think that's a big portion of you guys took a big step and a big, not a gamble. I mean, because it was a really new process to the area, and you're basically taking what is your at the end disposal ratio? Is it 10-15%?
Yeah.
Okay, so historically for brownfields or cleanups, you'd be loading trucks, and the soil disposal was generally the highest cost and one of the biggest time-consuming issues with remedial sites. So you kind of basically took out a lot of the trucking that would drive through the city, drive out of state, the materials leaving the area. Now you're taking that, and only 10 to 15% of what normally would go to a landfill is going to landfill, and you're making beneficial products that go back into the industry. There's still sand mining and quarrying and things like that, but the need for those materials is so great that this, the technology and you guys doing it puts material that would otherwise end up in a landfill back into circulation, which is huge.
Right. Yeah, and I don't consider ourselves competitors with the sand mines and even the landfills, just because I look at it more like from a value engineering standpoint, right? So like the landfill isn't, they don't care either way, whether you take in material that's 100% belongs in the landfill or 50% belongs in the landfill. It's just not really, for the Farmingdale plant, and even for our New Jersey facility, we're not really competing with the landfills. It's the other recyclers that you compete against. And same thing for the sand mines. The sand mines, there's always going to be a place for the sand mines because you're always going to have a need for the high-end structural concrete, right? That's 75% of all concrete made is non-structural, right? So there's 25% that's going into high-rises and deep foundations, where the specs are tight. The material has to be, source number approved material. That's not who we're competing against. We're going after the 75% of non-structural concrete that gets produced that doesn't necessarily need material that's coming from a finite resource.
Sidewalks or curbs, perfect example of that. Doesn't need this. It's not a bridge deck.
Exactly.
Are you guys servicing a lot of like municipalities with street sweepings and is that kind of
that is a new initiative of ours, is the street sweepings. Now that we have this hydro tip, it makes it so much easier for us because of the capacity that went capacity went way up. In the past, handling the street sweepings and dredge waste too is another big issue.
There you go, Kris. Now he's talking your game.
Yep, which is a very tricky thing to get rid of with regulations in place, and it's going to get trickier and trickier.
Well,
and
you can figure out a way to reuse that stuff. Man, home run.
I know. Yeah, ask any of the marine guys. The costs are astronomical.
We know we're heavily involved.
Yeah.
Sure. Maybe our listeners don't know. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's always, as disposal costs go up and as supply of new material, as those costs go up, there's a lot more room for innovation and new processes that maybe in the past weren't as financially feasible.
Yeah. Well, and you guys said you're doing about 300 tons an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And so how many hours a day does the facility operate?
I don't think I could move the material fast enough out the door, to the point where I have like a log jam of material that I can't get rid of. So it's standard business hours.
Like an 8-hour day?
Yeah, 8 to 10.
8 to 10 hours. So we're doing maybe 2,400 to 3,000 tons a day.
Mm-hmm.
That's still a good chunk of material.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it's significant. It's significant. And it really benefits the jobs that are on small footprints, so they can't stockpile material, and the jobs that are under a time crunch, and they got to get rid of it either way.
And you guys, if the plant's been around for 4 years, has it been processing at that rate for 4 years, or did it ramp up? And did you guys see a slowdown during the pandemic or anything?
We've ramped up gradually. The throughput of the plant is always going to depend on the material you're putting into it. So it really just depends on what's out in the market.
We talked about the byproducts or the waste products, right? So, excuse me. Is there like a limit to like the level of contamination you got? I know you can't take like oil-soaked soil or something crazy like that, but what's the cutoff? How do you guys decide, yes, we can process this, or no, that's too much for our facility? What's the limits here?
So the limit per our permit is we can take anything up to non-hazardous material. Right. So as long as it's not hazardous, we are allowed to take it in. Do we want to deal with all of it is a totally different question. And the answer is no. We don't have, we're not just accepting anything from anywhere. To me, one of the most important factors is the geotech, right? Your sieve analysis. The percent passing the number 200 sieve, which is basically the cut point between fine sand and mud and clay, that is what drives the cost. From an environmental standpoint, we had to realize that the percentage of fines is also going to dictate how hot my waste product is going to be. So I don't want to inadvertently take something in that's going to create maybe a hazardous waste, right? So the sweet spot for us are the jobs that are contaminated, but not grossly contaminated.
Are there any contaminants you guys totally avoid, like metals?
Yeah, there's a handful. Hexavalent chromium is one, and the reason is because we know that if you tried to put material that's contaminated with hexchrome through the plant, that compound would basically present itself in the water, right? So there's an issue with that. If I'm recycling all the water, I don't want to be recontaminating the products.
Everything, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So there's a short list of things like chlorinated solvents we want to stay away from. Some levels of PCBs we have like a pretty tight limit on that we don't really stray from. It also depends on the volume of the job too, because that'll dictate how easy or difficult it is to actually remove the contaminants.
So then when you guys do have the waste product, right?
Yeah.
What do you do with it?
Okay, so every 800 yards of material that comes out of the filter press, this is what dewaters the mud in the slurry that we extract. Every 800 yards we're sampling. When the results come back, we are assessing where can this material go, right? Typically, it's going to just one or two disposal sites, but they are out of state. But it's a waste, it's a profile. They know what the waste stream is. It's consistent material. The difference is there's going to be variations in the analytical, but the geotech is all perfectly consistent coming out of the plant. So they know what, they know what the challenges are with dealing with the material itself. It's just we go through the regulatory review process with them. Going out of state, the regulations are different.
You ship it by truck or rail or how?
Yeah, right now we go by truck.
Okay.
Yeah. So the goal for us ultimately is to have zero waste. Any waste or any product that goes out, we want to make sure that we're getting it to its destination in a sustainable way as well. So we do have access to rail. Rail really only pays right now if you're traveling more than 400 miles away. So if I have a site that's just over, in New Jersey, it's actually cheaper to truck it there than it is to send it to Jersey by rail. However, if you'd run into a situation where, and I've seen this typically with other types of materials that we kind of stay away from, if the material needs to go out to a landfill in Ohio or Western PA, rail it starts to get attractive.
All right, that's interesting. Very interesting.
As far as the finished reusable products, the gravel, the pea gravel, and so on, are you seeing just with the development market any trends or changes that you've seen as far as contractors requesting or even Posilico internally that you guys are trying to make and kind of make those blends with the wash plant?
Yeah. So Posilico Civil is catching on. I think we've been educating and training people on the the resources that they have available to them. We've kind of centralized our purchasing and stuff like that. So like all the material requisitions that come in from the field come through somebody in the materials division now. And so now, it's a lot of integration and cross-selling and making sure that we're getting the best price. Sometimes it makes more sense to buy from somebody else if the trucking is, there's always going to be a difference in the trucking.
Mm-hmm.
Trucking drives a lot of the costs. So, and the decision-making. So, for the end market development, we have like a steady base of customers. Commercial concrete is, what a lot of people are using the recycled aggregates for, because, they are cleaned aggregates. They are not coming from a mine. There is some variability, but when you have a mix and you only need to hit 3,000 PSI in the concrete.
So we can use these for like leaching pool rings or a catch basin or something.
People are using that all day long.
That's what I figured. Like a precast plant would love you guys.
Yes. And then even on the civil side, after you've installed the basins, you've got, gravel pits and fields and drainage fields and stuff. The material is getting consumed in that market as well.
Okay. So for me to just wrap up, maybe Kris, you have another question or two. The plant itself, I mean, it sounds like it's doing great. Any ideas or concepts maybe to expand or build more? We know the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act is still hanging out there, which will be probably a huge boom for the construction industry, engineering alike. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, it's the outlook is positive for sure. We're watching over this bill as well, making sure it's going to have a big impact on everything we do, us, you guys, everyone. The goal is always to continue to grow, but grow responsibly, right? So one of the main coincidences, let's call it, of this operation in this location is it's kind of a perfect storm of geology and geography as it relates to the economics of everything, right? So you're on Long Island. Where are you going to go to dispose contaminated soil? Off Long Island. So you got to cross the bridges. The trucking costs go way up. If you want to keep the material on the island and you want to bring it to the wash plant, well, native Long Island soil is perfect for a washing operation in general because it's a relatively low silt content, high sand and gravel content, and the quality of the sand is
excellent,
top notch.
Absolutely.
So, that doing this on Long Island is
an ideal place to.
It's an ideal
Sure.
place.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you tried to do this, say in South Carolina or North Carolina, where everything is clay, well, you're going to spend a boatload of money on very advanced equipment to generate waste for you, right? So
not get a whole lot of return on your investment.
Exactly. The yield is very high for us.
So Rob, you said you're limited to a 4-acre site. Is there any possibility to increase your throughput there in the future, or expand the site or facility? Yeah, I mean, because I see this as a real win for you guys and the environment.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time just at different facilities and looking at process, looking at throughput, looking at where's my bottleneck, where can I elevate that, and how can I create a new bottleneck with a higher capacity. So, like you always want to have one, and then when you run out of solutions, then you got a pretty optimized process. I am looking into some ways to increase the throughput. I know I have a lot of extra capacity for gravel, right? So if I can get the throughput up, say it's 400 tons an hour, the gravel end is not going to suffer because it's already, all the equipment's already in place to handle that volume. Right now my choke point is on my sand production, so I'm looking at some ways to maybe add a piece of equipment or modify some things we have just to elevate and keep improving.
Wow. Well, Kris, I got one last question, and it really has to do with, this is a mechanical process, right? You got to have breakdowns and Do you have redundancy built into this? I mean, how do you keep going if like a key piece of equipment needs to be serviced or replaced or repaired? What do you do?
Yeah, so over the years, we've built redundancy in. Okay, so when we first started the plant, because you can go around to all these different facilities that are out there. We traveled around. We saw some plants that were in action. But you don't really experience what those people experience on a daily basis, right? So you can go and you can take a tour and see. But what you really want to see is what happens when it hits the fan. And we've learned, not the hard way, but we've learned just through experience that when something goes down, when we first started the plant, it had zero redundancy. So if anything went down, if a sensor went bad, there's 500 sensors on the plant. If any of the conveyor belts had any issues, if the pump wasn't working right,
Oh, yeah.
the list goes on and on of things that could put you down. But just by paying attention to detail kind of and picking the process apart, we are able to find ways to modify some things. And basically the plant that we have now is very different from the one that
you guys started with 4 years ago, huh?
Yeah, in a good way. In a good way.
Sure.
It's all running just temporary solutions to immediate problems. Sometimes become permanent solutions, and you eliminate the problems, right? So
Yep.
certain things you need to plan for.
Well, what prompted this question is you mentioned the show Gold Rush, and half that show was those guys dealing with issues like that.
Exactly. So those
I love the show. My wife hates it.
Yeah,
So.
same here. Yeah, no, they're extremely creative. If you got to stop focusing on, what is this issue that's holding me up right now, and focus more on the big picture. Like, how do I produce? And what am I producing, and what quality am I producing? How fast am I producing? Some of the redundancy we built in, like we have a certain bypass system where if one piece of equipment goes down, we can run the plant in this bypass mode. However, you run it at a slower tonnage, right? So while you're still kind of producing, just at a lower rate, it's buying you time to, get the parts that you need and get the service and get the solution that you need.
Really cool.
A lot of moving parts.
Yeah. Chris, you want anything before we wrap up?
Just about the regulatory agencies involved. Obviously, I heard DEC was very behind this, and for rightfully so. What do you see as far as either regulations coming down the pike or the relationship with regulators and trying to – one thing that I see is, I'd like to work more with DEC to try and figure out solutions for things like dredge spoils, for more beneficial reuse options. And, sometimes for certain reasons they're a little rigid. And what do you see as far as regulations, as far as affecting your industry and what you're putting through? I think it's beneficial, for the most part, the regulations going through. But things like emerging contaminants and different low levels of acceptable soil contamination. What do you think? How do you think the regulations and your relationship with the regulators, is going to affect business and going forward?
Yeah. So one thing that we always applaud the DEC about, as you guys know, they've been revising the Part 360 regulations for a number of years now. One of the things that I love about the efforts they're making is how they open it up for public comment. And, we've got one of our senior engineers who's, he spearheads our correspondence with the DEC as it relates to the updated regulations. So, number one, the fact that they're updating them, when was the last time that it was updated? 1991?
Yeah, and they've gone through, yeah.
Right, so they recognize that we have regulations that are a little antiquated. They need updating. You guys remember the whole Operation Pay Dirt, and that kind of sparked a lot of change within the industry. So I think it's good to get with the times. Use industry for feedback.
Rob, anything you want to add before we wrap up for the day?
No, I appreciate you guys having me. This is always good.
It was great to have you.
Anytime you want to come out see the plant, be happy to show you guys around.
We would love a tour.
Yeah. You guys,
we'll take you up on that. That's great.
You've always been very good with I've seen it showing the industry, engineers, consultants, politicians, and trying to educate. And that I think that is, huge in your favor, just because educating the people how this happens, how it works, and the benefits, just, help make the regulators kind of understand this and understand the importance too. So I applaud you guys for that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's what we got today for you folks. So I do want to thank our guest again, Rob Tassey with Posilico. He's a manager of the soil wash plant in Farmingdale, and Kris Almskog, a senior vice president at PW Grosser, heads our environmental compliance division, and myself, your host, Paul Boyce, CEO and president of PWGC. Again, I want to thank our listeners for joining us, and again, to reach us, www.pwgrosser.com/podcast. This is the Environmental Echo, and we're signing off for today. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.